Five, four, three.
Good evening and welcome to Conversations. I'm your host, Orim Meikle, and I'm looking forward to 60 minutes of dynamic, comfortable, but insightful conversation. All are welcome. I want to welcome those on YouTube, Facebook, and those of us that are on Teams tonight. We're going to have a wonderful conversation. But before we get started, let me take a moment to introduce Bacola Watson. She's going to be helping me in the chat rooms online with your questions, your feedback. Bacola, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Aram. Welcome, everyone. For those on Teams, again, as always, we ask that you please have your cameras on so that we can see you. We would love to dialogue and see your smiley faces. And for those who are on YouTube, if you'd like to come over and join the conversation, I will be dropping the link for the registration to come over onto Teams, and that way we can have a face-to-face conversation with you. But I will do my best to incorporate the questions on YouTube as well. So welcome
Awesome.
everyone, and I'll yield it back to you, Arm.
Thank you, Bacola. And again, everyone, if you're coming on Teams, please put on your camera. We really want to speak with you face to face so we can share this conversation. Tonight's question, it's a hot button issue. I want to talk about whether or not these vaccines, the COVID vaccines, should they be mandatory? Now, there's a lot of things happening right now around us on many levels. But I want to ask you a question, and a few questions, in fact. But here's the question. Should COVID-19 vaccines be mandatory? Should we be mandated to take these vaccines? Before you answer, I'm going to ask for those that are on Teams, if you want to share whether or not you've been personally vaccinated. I know it's personal, but if you want to be free to do that, tell us why you chose to do that. And if you have not, and you feel like sharing that, give us your reason for not wanting to take the vaccine as well. But before we go into the question, I want to read a few things that I was hearing this week concerning those organizations, institutions that are supporting the mandating of COVID-19 vaccines. Listen to the amount of universities: York University, University of Toronto, Western University, Wilfrid Laurier University. All of these universities, and I'm sure others, have indicated that starting in the fall, all their students, staff, and faculty, in order to come to the universities, must be vaccinated. The federal government has legislated all healthcare workers, public sector employees. In fact, I want to give you a quote from the Prime Minister himself. All public servants who have no underlying health issues and who choose not to be vaccinated will face consequences. Sounds like we're living in the days of Revelation. So I just want you to think about those terms. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, MLSE, will require fans and staff to be vaccinated or present a negative test to attend games in the fall at Scotiabank Arena or at BMO Field. Our own Premier, Doug Ford, stated that all PC MPPs must be vaccinated, I think he had said by Friday, or face being booted out of caucus. That's quite interesting. One more quote from Andrea Horvath. She is the leader of the provincial New Democratic Party. She said, no unvaccinated person should be providing health care to our most vulnerable. No unvaccinated person should be teaching our children in the classroom. And the list goes on. It goes on. Air Canada, WestJet, the Elementary Teachers Federation. Everyone seems to be getting on board. The question I have for you tonight is, should these vaccines be mandated? Is this a question of freedom of rights, or is this a question of health care? Or are you going to talk to me and say this is in fact government overreach? Can I throw it out there? Does anyone want to jump in right away? Should these vaccines be mandated? If you don't want to take that question, tell me whether or not you've chosen. I'm not afraid to say that I have been vaccinated twice. I've chosen to go with the Pfizer route. I've had no side effects. I'm still alive and well. So for me, I've made that decision for my own health. But if you want to share that, please, by all means. But the question still stands, should these vaccines be mandatory? So let me throw that out there. Bacola, do we have any takers tonight?
Not yet, but I do have someone on YouTube already saying that
Okay.
yes, and their reason for saying yes is for the
Mhm.
safety of others. So it looks
Okay.
like this person is considering not just themselves, but
Okay.
they're considering the health of others. Now,
Okay.
Giselle has her hand up. So, Giselle,
Okay.
please
Let's go to
unmute.
Giselle. Let's go to Giselle.
Okay, great. Hi, good evening, everyone. And I'll divulge. Yes, I've been fully vaccinated. I went the AstraZeneca route simply because
Okay.
that was the first one available.
Right.
So I jumped in. So I was part of that um, group questioning what should I get to do about the second dose.
Right.
But I am fully
What were you
vaccinated.
concerned about when it came to the second dose? Was it health or concern of the vaccine itself?
Concerned with respect to the mixture of the vaccines.
Okay, switching,
Whether
right?
right, yeah, switching.
Okay.
Yeah. So like the person on
YouTube?
YouTube.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's um, a question of individual rights
Okay.
against public rights.
Okay.
So, and again, to use term individualism
Hmm.
versus collectivism.
Okay.
And my thought is that we do have, and we need to celebrate individual rights, but we
Okay.
also need to ensure that my individual rights does, do not impinge on the rights
And
of others.
how do you balance that in a situation like this where it's possible that I, being not vaccinated, could contract the virus and then spread it? How do you balance freedom of rights with public health? How do you do that?
You know what? I think public health in this case needs to
Trump's
trump
rights.
and trumps individual rights.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. You know
All right.
what? And I will even look at like the Far Eastern countries, the
Hmm.
Eastern countries, where collectivism is more the appetite of the day, this, of the day, where um it's the good of the
The
group,
whole, right?
the whole, that is taking precedence. And you find with that
Hmm.
approach, they were even able to control the spread
Okay.
a whole lot more than the Western countries, where individual rights
Okay.
take precedence.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So
Okay. So I hear you.
yeah,
You're saying that public health should trump individual rights.
yes,
Okay.
especially in this with this
In this situation,
virus,
it's
with
clearly
this
in this context. Yes.
in this context, simply because of the deleterious impact of the
Hmm.
virus itself.
Here's an
You,
example that we were talking about before we came on air.
yeah,
This is a small, like a microcosm of this truth. Your child has a right to go to school, has a right
yes.
to learn in the public system. But if your child wakes up with a fever or the flu or a cold, do you not instruct your child to stay home? Or would the teacher not say to your child, it would be better to stay home for the good of the other children in the classroom? Is that a similar concept?
It's exactly so, exactly so. And not only that, but as I said, because of the impact, because even like for example in daycares and stuff, you
Hmm.
know the kids are always coming home sick, runny noses and stuff. But the result of the flu virus, as opposed to the COVID-19, which is another type of flu virus,
Right.
which it could be rapid death,
Hmm.
could result in rapid death. I mean, that mandates some sort of urgency and some sort
Right.
of strict approach.
Giselle, just before you go, I'm going to go over to someone else. I'm asking you
Yeah,
a question.
sure.
In Richmond Hill this week, a
Yeah,
mother sent her child to daycare with symptoms.
yeah,
When they discovered the child had symptoms, they fined the mother $800. Do you agree with that?
totally,
Okay.
totally.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let me jump
because
over.
if
Mhm.
my child were to die because of contracting the virus, it's my child's life. As a matter of fact, I think it should be even more.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
the
Bacola?
fine should have been even more. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Giselle. I appreciate the input.
Garrick is waiting to weigh in as well. Please
Garrick's jumping
unmute.
in. Jump in, Garrick.
Yeah, so my information may be out of date, so I'm open to be corrected if my
Okay. Go ahead.
information is incorrect.
Hmm.
But my understanding is that the vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting it and doesn't prevent you from transmitting it.
Yeah.
It's only in the event that you do get it, you have a less
Less
chance of dying.
likely to die. And you're right. It's not 100% foolproof. Everyone will say that.
Right. So then if that information is still correct, then my challenge is that I believe that the vaccine is really presenting a fake sense of security
Okay.
because people that are vaccinated, if they're still able to spread it, then how is that really any safer than the people who are not vaccinated? right? And the people who choose not to be vaccinated for whatever the reasons are, and I've heard a variety of really sound reasons for not being vaccinated. Like I've heard people say, if I'm not sick, I'm not presenting any symptoms, why should I be discriminated against because I choose not to put a foreign substance in my body, right? Now, if it was like, vaccines back in the days like chicken pox or measles that prevent you from actually getting the disease and from spreading the disease, then I could understand more why there would be such a heavy hand towards enforcing it. But if it's really not going to prevent the spread, I really don't. I lean more towards the side of it being government overreach, at least at this point. If it develops to the point where it can actually prevent it, like some other vaccines have been developed, then I think I might have a different opinion. But for now, I see it as government overreach.
Do you think there's been any efficacy with the vaccines, though, Garrick? If you look at the numbers, clearly, in areas where there's vaccination, those numbers are declining, clearly. I mean, a few months ago, we were looking at 3,000 cases a day. Now we're looking at between 300 to 500 a day. Clearly, something's at work mitigating the spread, whether we can attribute that to vaccines or just the passing of time. I would probably lean more to the vaccine, but would you think the numbers are proof that maybe this is working to some degree?
Well, it seems like those two facts are kind of contradictory, though, because if it seems like if the vaccine is stated, as they said, not to prevent somebody from transmitting it, then and the numbers are going down, I don't know if that's necessarily a one-to-one conclusion, right? Like if they said the vaccine does prevent you from spreading it and the numbers went down, then yeah, 2 and 2 makes 4, right?
Could it be that it's early in the development stage of the vaccine that they can't be, certain that it's a preventative, but clearly we're seeing signs that it's a preventative? Because most of the vaccines, including Pfizer, have not been fully approved by the FDA. We know that. Pfizer is just getting their approval, I think. In fact, they're in process of getting it. But could it be that maybe they're onto something, that these vaccines are working to some degree, even if they have not fully approved them?
It is possible, but then anything that has all those questions around it really shouldn't be mandated.
Okay.
Right?
Is it then the death factor that people are afraid of? The fact that
I'm
people
not
are
sure what you
dying.
mean by that.
The fact that people are dying from this disease that's making people fearful and then moving us now to the whole issue of mandating. Because if I guarantee you, if people weren't dying, we probably wouldn't be taking this stance, right?
And that I'm not 100% sure about either, because if you look at pandemics in the past, whether it's Spanish flu or Ebola or whatever the case may be, there were people dying at the same time as well. I think that what's different about this particular situation is that we're now in an age where information spreads very rapidly,
and misinformation too, right?
And misinformation spreads rapidly as well. And not only that, but with the whole movement of things like cancel culture and social media, if one person stands up and if one popular person stands up and says something, whether or not it's true, we tend to have a lemming approach where we'll just all follow suit, and that extends to all levels of society, from the lowest right up to governments and corporations.
Okay, Garrett, before you go, how do you feel about masks? Do you feel like you're going to a restaurant, they're going to mandate you put on a mask? Do you feel okay with that, or you think that that's infringing on your rights as well?
Well, that I can get behind that a little bit more, for the same reason. And I don't want to like start preaching too much here, but
you're doing fine.
I think about the scripture where Paul says that, one person eats meat and is fine, the other person eats meat and they think it's a sin because it's been offered to idols. So I would put on a mask even though I know that I'm not symptomatic and I know I don't have the disease, but for the comfort of those around me, I would definitely wear a mask.
What about gathering in the church?
Gathering in the church, I'm all for it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Garrick.
So I saw Giselle shaking his head at times and bopping, and your hand is up. So did you want to weigh in on something that Garrick mentioned, or this is something totally different?
Do you want to respond? Yeah, are you doing a response to Garrick, Giselle?
Yes, please. Yes. So, Garrick, this might come as a surprise to you, but no vaccine ever created prevents any disease. No vaccine is 100% efficacious. So the fact that over the years, vaccines against measles and whatever other childhood vaccines we take, we see a decline in those diseases, prove the efficacy of the vaccine. But again, no vaccine is 100%. So similar with COVID-19, the scientists, I think, are being more transparent now and are clearly stating that the COVID-19 vaccines are not 100% efficacious. While they do not 100% prevent the contraction of this disease, it certainly does reduce the likelihood of contracting the disease as well as the morbidity. So you find less people will contract the disease who have the vaccine. And if you do contract the disease, the degree of illness, the morbidity, and even mortality rates would have declined, as well as this sudden upswing again that Toronto is experiencing in the disease. About 90 to 95% of the positive tests are unvaccinated persons.
Which is what they're saying. They're saying, yeah, the higher, right, it's generally in the unvaccinated segments that we're finding that people are contracting the disease. Again, everyone on the conference, here's the question. Should COVID vaccines be mandated? If you want to get into your own personal story and say, I've not taken the vaccine, I'm open to that as well. Or here's another question I'll throw out for you. If you take the vaccine, is it a lack of faith? Can you take the vaccine and still say, I've got faith? So I'm throwing it out there. Please don't look at me. I need to hear from you. So jump in the conversation. Let us know. How do you feel about the mandating of these vaccines? How do you feel about the coming vaccine passport that's coming in the fall, giving you access into this restaurant, access into the movies? Do you feel that that's the right thing to do? If I'm not vaccinated, should I be able to enter this restaurant? Or does the restaurant have the right to say, we are not taking your patronage because you're not vaccinated? I need to hear from you tonight. What are your thoughts? Bacola, any takers out there?
Yes, I see Giselle's hand up again. But Giselle, before you even get started, I wanted to, share my personal view, if I could.
Please go ahead.
We were talking earlier before we started about my thought just escaped me now. But anyhow, I was one of those people who kind of waited and didn't.
Would you consider yourself an anti-vaxxer? Were you against the vaccine?
No, I was never an anti-vaxxer.
What were you waiting for?
I was just, because it was new and no one's been able
to see who died first.
Call me selfish, maybe, but yes,
nothing wrong with that, right?
I wasn't going to be used as a guinea pig, so I wanted to kind of see. Yeah. But for me, I decided to take it because there's been a lot of conversation now about the people who have not received the vaccines and causing more of the problems for I guess for society now, and I know I want to travel. I know it's going to come down to you not being able to go to certain countries if you're not vaccinated. And I'm in the same position with Dion when we were talking earlier. Sorry, this is what I wanted to bring forth. So I was one of the people that said to myself, if I can control my immune system, I watch what I eat, I watch what I put into my body, I can withstand this thing. But it doesn't mean a lack of faith now that since I made the decision to get the vaccination. It's just
you still believe you got faith?
I still believe I have faith. Yes, I have faith that God
take the vaccine.
I'm sorry?
One can have faith and take the vaccine.
Yes, you can have faith and take the vaccine.
Ask Garrick if he believes that.
Garrick, do you believe that? Giselle is laughing hysterically.
We always go. Garrick's our go-to. Garrick, do you believe you can have faith and take the vaccine?
You absolutely can, and I don't think that it's really a question of faith or not faith, right?
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. Like when this is just me. I can't speak for anybody else, but if I get a headache, a cold, or whatever, I go to Proverbs 4 because it says the word of God is health to all my flesh, and I take it like medicine. Okay. Now, other people, they reach for the aspirin bottle and they're fine. That's not for me to judge where their faith level is, because God provided the word, and God provided the doctors with the intelligence to create aspirin.
Okay.
So it's not really a matter of faith or not having faith in my mind. And with the vaccine, whether you take it or not, I don't see it as a question of being an either or. You have faith or you don't have faith. One of the things that I just find disturbing about the whole vaccination thing is that it's really showing a lot of similarities to the administration of the mark of the beast.
That's what I was going to ultimately get to, Gary. Do you think there's some greater conspiracy at work here? And those of you that are on the conference, do you see a greater conspiracy? Are we setting up for the days when there may be the possibility of this thing that we've read in the Bible called the mark of the beast? Is this a dress rehearsal for those days? And would that be one of the reasons why people are more hesitant to be involved now?
I think it is very much a dress rehearsal, because like if I was a master planner from a sinister level, these are the sorts of things I would use to test out the distribution system of any widespread system of control, right?
Okay.
So, and it's been done in other countries, on smaller scales back in days of dictatorships and monarchy rules and things like that. But
Gary,
yes, sir.
Just a quick question. So this for you, just in what you're saying, this is not a question of health. This is a system of control, you're saying?
I think that it's more system of control masked in a cloak of health than it is about public health.
Okay.
Right?
And I don't know if you know go ahead, Garrick, sorry.
And going back to Giselle's comment about the other known vaccines against measles and mumps and so on and so forth, even with those ones, which have a longer history and longer efficacy, they're not being as heavily mandated and pushed as this particular vaccine. And you really have to wonder why that is, right? I know that, people will throw around the infection rate and death factor and so on and so forth. But if you look at a human history, is it really that much more severe than the Black Plague or the Spanish flu or any of the other pandemics of the past? Why is this one in particular being treated in a more heavy-handed manner, like on a global scale?
Would you agree, though, that since those times there's been great advances in medical science, though? Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. But
okay.
And at the same time, there's also been advances in the ability through technology and through media to control larger amounts of people, right? So going back to what you were saying about the dress rehearsal of a mass system of control, if I was a conspiracy theorist, this would be a perfect scenario to test that out.
Almost suggesting that the vaccine could be the mark of the beast, huh?
No, I'm not saying the vaccine is the mark of the beast, but as far as the distribution and the rollout of a global control system, this is a perfect scenario to test that out.
Okay, very good. Excellent, thank you.
Letitia, I saw your hand up earlier. You wanted to say something, but I know Giselle's hand had been up earlier.
Can we go to Letitia, though? Giselle, do you mind just deferring to Letitia? I'd love to hear what... Yeah. Let's go to Letitia.
No,
I sort of don't remember what I was going to say, but but I wanted to touch on actually what is going on in my workplace. So I work in a vulnerable population in a shelter. And so we intake the clients inside of there. And when we do these things, we now ask them if they've been vaccinated, and if they have, which one that they got. Now, majority of our clients, and I cannot lie, majority of our clients say, oh, yes, I have been vaccinated. It's the one that's been up my nose. And they cannot determine if it's been the one where they're getting tested or if they've been injected. Another thing that we ask them, sorry?
I was going to ask you, in your workplace, are you mandated to be vaccinated?
No.
Okay, so you can be unvaccinated and still work with the people in the shelter system?
Yes.
Okay, so are you forced to take a test every time you show up at work?
We have to do a temperature test.
Okay.
And then they've now taken that away for the employees. Now we just ask a couple of questions and then we just submit the form that they have virtually online.
Okay.
So
And then
they've
you
now taken away the temperatures.
and then you're working with people who may not even know what vaccines they've taken.
Exactly. We
Mm.
have asked them, okay, so upon intake, when we write it down inside of the notes, we ask them, which one have you taken? Majority of them say they don't know which one, but they've just been given it to them, but they know they've gotten two. And then they have this thing where, oh, well, I heard that we can mix it, so we got a bunch. And another
Right.
thing they're doing for the population is that they're paying them, and they pay them as little as things like $5 just to get it. And so
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the whole process of people being forced to take the vaccine? How do you feel?
And that brings me back to what Garrick was saying, where they're like, well, they're just giving things out and testing it out and seeing, well, is that what's going on? Because that's what I'm getting in my workplace. I'm thinking, well, you guys want 90% of the people to be vaccinated, but you're just vaccinating people, but not educating them on what they're actually doing. You're not giving them the choice on, is it something they want to do or is it something they have to do? They're enforcing it like they have to do it.
Right. And
That's
you'd rather see a more educational approach.
Yes, I'd rather like give us the option to do it because to my understanding, children when they're younger, when they're inside of school, they have to get like their shots done and all those stuff. So those things are mandatory for them at that young age, even as newborns. But
Right.
then you give us the option as adults and you're saying, okay, we're going to mandate this. And it's mandated because no one's listening to you, or are you mandating it because you think that it's going to be better for the world out there and the health?
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's where
That's
I get a little bit confused
yeah.
because, you know, you're going to enforce it. So we've had a couple of people that's left the country and they do this thing where you now have to pay to go and get your test done before
Right.
even leaving. You can't even use the free testing to get it done. And then you go to the other country and let's say you've passed through someone and you've now caught COVID, but you're now over there. So you're going to have to quarantine for X amount of time to get back here. And then when you get back here, you have to now go and quarantine still for a little bit before you come home to quarantine again.
Right. Right.
So
Okay.
it's a little bit iffy with me on that end.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Letitia.
Okay.
Appreciate that so much. You want to go back up to Giselle now? Giselle, did you want to
please,
weigh in?
yes.
Yeah, sure. And Letitia spoke to a bit on what I wanted to mention. And again, it is with respect to mandating and speaking to Garrick's point that the other vaccinations, the measles and all the various flus and stuff, and chickenpox and everything, weren't mandated. Yes, they were mandated, and they still are, because for our children to get into schools, we have to choose, you know, we have to
Yeah, it's just an immunization program.
right, exactly. And I remember as a child in school, when every time there was a flare up of some disease, polio or whatever it is, you'd have the public health workers coming into the schools to vaccinate every single child.
Correct.
So the thing about it, so that mandatory vaccination program has always been there. Even right now, to go to some
what is the
countries.
fear then? What is the fear in some? Is it because some of these vaccines are unproven? Like, what is the fear? Because you're right. I remember even in school we were vaccinated for some of these
Yeah.
things.
So
What is the fear today, though?
all right. Actually, the fear hasn't just arisen today. It has arisen at
It's
least in the
always been
last
there.
20 years. And I know a primary case is that some adults or some parents whose children have been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum attribute the vaccinations
Okay.
to, because they said they would say that their children were progressing and maturing normally until
This happens. So
so
it's really a
right.
fear of the unknown, right?
So it's a fear of the unknown. So while
Is that
there's no
fear,
science,
Giselle, is
yeah,
that fear truly applicable in all areas when it comes to medication? Because here's an example. When we're traveling to places like Africa, the Caribbean, immediately before we go get our tickets, we know we've got to go to see the doctor. And we know the
That's
doctor's
right.
going to say, you need this shot, it's malaria, you need this, you need this. We take the shots. We
Exactly.
take the malaria pills 3 times a day leading up, 3 times when we're there, 3 times. We don't
Exactly.
really have that much of a problem when we're traveling. Why then do we have this concern now when it comes to this specific moment of immunization?
Yeah,
What's the concern?
I think too, the pervasiveness of the illness itself has brought it in to the forefront
Okay,
of our attention,
okay.
as well as most
Do you think
vaccines
misinformation
historically.
has played a role?
Huge,
Misinformation
huge, and the conspiracy
and the
theory and
conspiracy
the
theories?
theory as well. As well, some of the fear might be justified
Okay,
because
fair, fair.
previously vaccines before they came to market, it would take about 5 years to
So the
test and see
speed in which they prepared these vaccines is a
vaccines
concern.
could also would also
Okay,
be a concern
okay.
as well. Um, yeah,
And maybe the reality that there have been people who, because I was in a conversation just before coming on air, a young
right,
lady told me that a friend of hers took the vaccine and got a stroke. So
exactly.
there are
So
cases like that where people have had, can I say, effects to the vaccine
yes,
that have been, not so, can I say,
yeah.
nice.
Exactly. So exactly. So this with respect to the short period of time coming to market, we do not know if
Hmm.
all adverse reactions have been identified and tested. So I think possibly that leads to some amount of fear. And then of course the other fear is the mark of the beast syndrome, because um I think the government might be, or the governments worldwide might be overreaching
Hmm.
in some cases, this vaccine, but not a vaccine, the passport. But how is the passport different from the immunization cards that we had before,
True. How is that really
right?
different,
How is it
right?
how is it different?
Because the immunization card allowed your children to be in school.
Exactly, right? And so it's a yeah, it's a tough place. We as a world, we're in a tough place at
Right.
this time. Yeah, we're in a tough place at this time. But I can definitely see the concern. And the thing about it is, I guess because of the origin of
The
the
disease
virus
itself.
itself,
Hmm.
a
Right.
few know, a few know the origin, but
Very few.
the world doesn't know whether it's man-made or whether it jumped from animals to
Hmm.
humans.
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
And
I've
I
heard.
guess, yes, so that even thickens the plot or provides fodder for more of the conspiracy theories to be
Hmm. Yeah. To
to,
spread.
to spread. But the thing about it is individually, we each have to weigh the risks and decide what risk are we
Right.
willing to bear. So
Right.
with respect to the vaccine, we don't know the long-term effects. We don't even know all of the current impacts of the vaccine, and we don't know the
Right.
long-term effects.
Right.
We do know that with the disease, some of the short-term impacts can not only be the morbidity but the mortality, but
Right.
even on a longer term, we don't know um, what are the persisting symptoms that will
Right.
take, take us into sorry, that will take us into our senior years. So
Right.
each person um, has to take
Is
assess
it
the
any
risk for
different
themselves.
than is well, given the situation, is it any different than going to your doctor and saying, "Doctor, what do you think? Should I, you know me, you've been my doctor for 20 years, 30 years, should I take this vaccine?" And taking the advice in the same way that you take the advice from your doctor if you've got a pain in your head or you've got something in your side, you take advice, go fill this prescription at Shoppers Drug Mart, you do that, and you believe certain things. Is there any difference here now where you go to your family doctor, sit down with your doctor, you're taking the professional advice of your doctor, and the doctor says, I think this is okay for you to take, go ahead and take that.
Yeah,
Is there any difference at all?
the huge difference is
Is?
how contagious the virus is.
Okay.
So my decision to
Mhm.
not be vaccinated can impact everyone I come into contact with.
Okay.
So in other words, if I choose not to be vaccinated, I have to make a choice to forever wear the mask
Hmm.
and to forever isolate myself from situations where I can come into contact with people because I am endangering those people.
So now you're being a good neighbor.
So now you're being a good. So not
Okay.
taking the vaccine, you're not being a good neighbor. So
Okay.
so in order
Okay.
to,
All
so
right.
in
Let me
order
ask.
to
Let
be
me
a
ask.
good
Let me ask
neighbor,
someone
you've
else
got
on
to
the
isolate
conversation.
yourself.
If I don't take the vaccine, am I not being a good neighbor?
You're not being a good neighbor.
That's what you. Okay, I hear you, Giselle. Let me throw
Yeah.
that. Anybody else want to
Okay.
chime in on that? If I choose not to take the vaccine, am I not being a good neighbor? Am I not loving my neighbor as myself? Am I not being my brother's keeper? Does it go down that road? Anyone want to jump in? Is that Leticia
I
coming in?
think it's your personal choice.
Okay.
And I think you own that right. And,
Even if it potentially impacts the health of someone else? Potentially.
well, it could potentially, even if you were following the immunization and vaccine, that
Which
like when
Garrett
you were sitting with
just
the child.
earlier.
So that's
Okay.
how I see it. I see it as that is your personal choice. I have some friends
Mhm,
who have spoken to me. They've said that they've gotten their vaccine and
mhm.
they're like, I'd rather feel comfortable if you come and you hang with me that you wear a mask. I'm like, okay, no problem. Mind you, I've hung with them, no mask, they have been okay. I feel
Okay.
like they have been conditioned to say these things
Mhm.
as to I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel safe. But then the moment that it's not repetitive all these times, that they're okay with it. I think that's what
Would you be okay not getting access into certain areas, public areas, not going to the movies, them not letting you into a restaurant, not letting you into a sporting event? Would you be okay with that?
no, and that's where I feel like they're stripping my rights when they do this thing called mandate. Like
Okay.
you put the mandate into place,
Uh-huh.
and now what do we hold as a human being?
Okay,
You're
so
just
let me ask you a question then. You have the right to choose. Does the owner of the venue have the right to deny you access?
they do if they have that into play.
Okay.
If that is
But you just don't like it though.
policy, they're allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because I feel like they're now going to put that policy into play. Just like if you don't wear a mask, you're not allowed to enter.
Right.
But
Right.
if the policy is allowed that they're not allowed to let someone in, then unfortunately I have to follow through with it. But it's the fact that that policy was put into place and it was allowed is where my issue is where
Right.
my right is taken away.
Okay. What about coming to a church facility, a sanctuary? Should they stop you if you don't wear a mask if you're coming in?
I think wearing a mask is important. Rema's big.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a lot of things called singing. Mind you, those who are on the stage, I think are not entitled to wear a mask
Right.
because able to social distance in some sort of way. I know I've gone to a church where they said once you sit down, then you're able to take your mask off, just like if you were to go into a restaurant. So I
Right.
think you can respect that by walking in and doing that. But the moment that I feel you say, well, you can't enter until you get your vaccine, I think, well, that's stripping my right because I'm not leaving the country. I'm not going anywhere. I'm within my country. I should be able to still continue doing these things if I wear my mask, if I social distance. But now you're adding on another point. You have to
Another
now
layer, right? Okay.
right?
Okay. I appreciate that, Leticia. Thank you so much. Bacola, do you have any more takers?
I've got
Any?
Garrick and Giselle. Garrick, please unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have a question. And again, my information may be
Sure,
out of
Gary.
date, so I'm open for correction. If
Okay.
a person is able to present no symptoms, a negative COVID test, and they're wearing a mask, my understanding is that they can still be denied access or employment if they're not vaccinated, whereas they are able to prove conclusively by all the current methods that they're not a threat.
Yeah.
Is that
Well, as
correct?
far
Have
as I
I
know,
heard
Gary,
correctly on that?
as far as I know, and I don't know everything obviously, what I'm hearing is that the counter to the vaccination is the negative test. So either you're vaccinated or you can present a negative test. One of those two will work. But in the absence of those two, certain things are going to kick in, and that's what the Prime Minister, I suspect, is meaning by consequences. So I do believe that when it comes to travel, it's the same thing, vaccination or a negative test. When I spoke about access to MLSC, it was either a vaccination proof or a negative test. So I think they're looking at one of those two things. Now,
Okay.
on issues of
Because the
employment, Garrick, I don't know
information
how
that
far that stretches.
Right, and that's the information which I found very troubling, in that the negative test was actually not being considered as a credible as a credible means of access to these restricted areas anymore. You had to be vaccinated to travel, and you had to be vaccinated to eat at a restaurant, and you had to be vaccinated to do all these other things, to go to church, which, I don't know if it's as extreme, but it actually put me in remembrance of Jim Crow laws that used to be in the States, and just wondering if history is not repeating itself.
Right. You know what, Garrick? I'm going to read something I've got here. New York City implements vaccine-proof policy for public areas such as gyms and restaurants. So down south, i.e. New York City, I know that as of this week, they've implemented those policies in restaurants and gyms, vaccination-proof. So clearly it's happening in certain parts of the world.
That being said, is it not troubling to anybody?
That's my question, Garrick. My question
Giselle has an answer.
Is it overreach, or is it good citizenship?
May I jump in? Sorry.
Yes, jump right in.
Sorry. So just to let you know, I'll probably always have my hand up, but you can always go to other people. But and again, so both Garrick and Pastor, you're right. The option of not having the vaccine then is to show a negative test, but it will also speak about the frequency of negative tests. So I'm thinking probably that's what the prime minister will do. Probably ask for unvaccinated people to do weekly tests.
Yes, it's the rapid test every time you're showing up for your shift.
Yes.
Rapid test. I think the idea there is to get you so tired of testing that you ultimately say, "Let me take the vaccine."
Okay,
that's the goal.
But
I do see this though, Giselle. I do see a level of what's called vaccine shaming taking place in society. Yeah. And I do see that smaller group, whether it's 25%, 20%, they are definitely being targeted. So the unvaccinated today, they are definitely being targeted. That's clear. That we can say without any reservation.
And I think so too. And even someone said you're introducing a new class, the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated.
Correct.
And a new system for discrimination. But again, I'll give you the example of Alyssa Milano. She's a TV star. And she said that in the early part of the pandemic, she was feeling ill. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, let me go get a test, and came up negative. She did 2 tests and came up negative. Months after, she went into her doctor for some other complaint, and they found antibodies in her system, which means at some time she did have the virus. She did contract the virus, but the test came up negative. So the thing about it is the vaccine, the mask, and everything are all part of a toolkit. The vaccine is just one element of the toolkit to reduce the risk. And that's what we want to minimize risk. We are never risk-free. We just want to minimize the risk of the spread of the disease. So can I ask another question? And
before you do that, hold your question for 1 second. Let me ask you this question. As a church community, should we be celebrating advances in medical science? Or should we be challenging what you say, yes?
And I would, okay. I will say gladly yes, but with a bit of skepticism.
Okay.
And why I say gladly yes? Because I know traditionally, there has been this conflict between science and faith, spirituality. Right? And to me, there's absolutely no conflict. Simply because my take on it is science is simply God's way of revealing in time how he has created the world and how the world works. So over the course of time, through science, when the Lord chooses, he gives insight into how things work, and therefore insight into how we can prevent and fix anomalies. So that is my take on science. So I absolutely see no conflict. Does that mean science is always good? No. Guess what?
Right.
Because men aren't always good.
Right.
So, for example, the COVID-19 virus, we don't know whether it was created in a lab for chemical warfare and biological warfare, right? So,
Right.
so
what you're
you
saying
know,
is knowledge is good. The challenge is with the users.
that's right.
Okay.
Yes. All
Fair
right.
enough.
So, where was I going? Oh, yes. Sorry, I just wanted to make an example of a simple everyday example. Read the vaccine seat belts.
Right.
Aren't seat belts mandated?
True.
Aren't
Very
we
true.
charged if we don't have a seat belt?
Most definitely.
Do seat belts prevent deaths and accidents?
In most cases, not every
It
case.
minimizes the risk. Some people who have on seat belts will still die if they. But every time we get into a car, don't we
It's a
buckle up?
preventative.
It's a preventative, right? But don't we buckle up? So it's just a tool in the whole safe driving.
That's a
sphere.
very good point, because no one is really going to, on this conversation, argue that my rights are being infringed because I have to wear a seatbelt.
No.
Interesting.
Or that because seatbelts don't 100% prevent all death, I will not wear a seatbelt. A seatbelt. The fact
Very
is,
interesting.
yes, you want to minimize your risk. You want to use every tool, washing the hands, the mask, the vaccine. At least that's my thought. Possible to prevent.
And that's a fair. I hear a lot of medical professionals saying that the real goal is to mitigate the spread. It's to slow it down to a point where it isn't as prevalent as it was before. And so all of these things you're saying is valid.
With all of these conspiracy theories around vaccines that have been popping up over the years, do you know we have the rise against and the reoccurrence of measles and diseases that were thought, and polio, and diseases that were thought to have been in control, that we had in control, are no longer prevalent. We are seeing a rise of them again.
Right. Here's what I would say, though, to everyone. I would say to everyone on the conference, even as a leader, I would say that we should be very careful with the misinformation and the conspiracies. The reason why I say that is, in a lot of cases, the people pushing the conspiracies are misinformed in a lot of cases. They're not very versed biblically. I mean, forget COVID. We think about when we were transitioning from the 90s to the 2000s. And there was this end of the world carrying on, Y2K bug, this. I went to watch night service, not a thing happened. So I think we've got to be careful, because human beings, we love conspiracies. We love to make up these things. We just love them. And I think the church sometimes falls into that trap as well. I remember maybe about 2 decades ago, Procter & Gamble decided that they were going to put 666 on the products. And all of a sudden, people stopped buying the toothpaste because it was the mark of the beast. And you looked at license plates, the government started putting 666 as a number on the license plate. We love those kind of conspiratorial trails. But in most cases, at the end of the day, very few people are edified by them. And in fact, what I find that these conspiracies do is they create divisiveness in humanity. They create camps and sects until we start fighting against each other. And ultimately, all these conspiracies really do is they further the work of the devil. They certainly don't give glory to God. So I'm a little careful on that. I don't lean to them. I caution people, be very careful of these conspiracy theorists, whether they claim to be Christians or non-Christians. That's just my little counsel for tonight. So sorry about that. Bacola, do we have any more takers in the chat room or on the?
Not really, but I've seen Robert agreeing at times. Your hand was up. I'm curious to see if you have anything to share.
I'd love to hear from Robert tonight.
I know Daniel also had a question in the chat. I'm wondering if you would like to put that out to everyone.
Well, I can see Daniel. Why don't we hear Daniel's question? But let me hear Robert quickly, then we'll go to Daniel.
Okay.
Robert, what are your thoughts tonight?
My thoughts are that in terms of mandating it, I see the mandating from 2 angles.
Okay.
The first component is that I don't agree that the government should mandate it for everybody. I want people to be able to have their choices. But on the other side of it, I want institutions to be able to do what they also choose. Because if we are talking about rights, people having their rights and they can choose not to take it or to take it, then institutions should equally have their rights to actually be able to do what they choose. Just for clarity, I have taken Pfizer, number one and number two. So I have taken it.
But Robert,
in
would you see a clash between those two thoughts, though? The right of government, the right of the individual, the right of institution. All of a sudden, these rights are going to buck heads, and we're
They
going to have
have
some
to be
challenges, right?
balanced in a way. Just like we look at every time that we look at risks. Not every risk can be actually eliminated.
Okay.
There are some form of risks that we have to mitigate. There are some form of risks that we have to actually accept. And all of these things brings us to the point that all the things we are talking about in terms of the vaccine is not going to be 100%, to prevent things. But one thing that I am so curious about is that people who don't want to take the vaccine, how come when they are sick, they go to the hospital? If they don't believe that the same scientists that actually, are doing these things are actually there to help humanity.
Right.
How come you're sick and you decide to go to the hospital?
Good question, Robert.
Right.
Good question.
So if we look at it, then that's double standard. They know that something, maybe they are misinformed. I mean, it's their choice. I don't want to mandate.
Robert, the truth of the matter is we all live by double standards at some point. We'll praise the Lord in the church and scream for faith, but if something goes wrong, we'll reach for the medicine. So I think in some cases we do live that double standard life. And I think for us, it's contextual. I'll go to the hospital for this, but I'll fight the vaccine over here. Do you know what I mean? And I think we all suffer from that split or duality.
For sure. We've all fallen short in one way or the other. Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of things that have been there. I mean, one of the reasons why people are hesitant is the speed at which this vaccine was developed.
Which is what Giselle was saying. And I think I agree. I think there's room for skepticism.
Right. But one thing we are not also talking about is the advancement of technology.
Right.
I mean, as we are sitting here 10 years ago, what we are doing today was not possible.
May not even be conceived.
Right. So if we look at it and we are looking at how things are going, then we can look at it even today, the level that we have reached in terms of the breakthrough in technology and other things.
That's a good side, Robert. I never saw that like that, but we could be looking at the speed of these vaccines as being consistent with where we are in the advancement of our humanity. So that's a very good point.
Right. So when we put all this together, what I'm saying is that you asked another question as to whether, when this advancement in technology or breakthroughs come, is in line with our belief system. Yes, of course, it's God who created man. And if you understand that God created man and accepted that God created man and breathed into man, God breathed into man his spirit, then that creativity is in man.
Right.
That ability to create things is in man.
All knowledge is from God, right?
Sorry?
All knowledge is from God.
All knowledge is of God. So these people, we can rule out the fact that people use that knowledge wrongly, as a result of the choices that they are using it for. Right. But at the same time, there is the good side of it.
Yeah, so we have to the user that matters, right?
Right. So we have to balance this and understand those who have been through medical, personally, I've been through some medical stuff, and when I look at the kind of things they did, you realize that, I mean, the fact that maybe I couldn't do that doesn't mean that others don't have the capacity and ability to do some great things.
Right.
So we should give people the benefit of the doubt, and we shouldn't doubt that God, in every situation, God is still going to use us, the human beings, to be able to turn things around. So most of the cases when we pray, I heard this from one particular leader who said, when we pray, there are times that God will avert the situations, without us even, miraculously or supernaturally. But at times He will bring other people on our way who have knowledge about the situation to be able to help us to go through. That's the way I look at this particular thing that we have.
Very good. Thank you, Robert. Let me move over quickly, Bukola. Let's go to Daniel. We've got 5 minutes left. Daniel, what are your thoughts tonight?
Can you unmute Daniel, please?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Sorry. Yes, good evening, everyone. My thoughts are this subject moves back to what we were discussing last week.
Okay.
Because we fall under a parliamentary democracy as a government. And they have overreach on all areas of our lives.
Right.
We can try to say we have individual rights. But if the government says pay taxes, you're going to pay taxes.
Right.
Regardless. Yes. If the government says a red traffic light you cannot pass, you are going to get a ticket. Regardless, you could say, you know what, there was no cars coming, so I thought I could pass. I was in a hurry.
I tried that once, Daniel.
So you are still.
But I got a ticket.
You are still in violation.
Right.
So I think the bigger picture is where we are trying to contest is not our platform. There's a bigger platform, which is the Canadian government.
Right.
And now you have to use your mind or thinking and say what makes sense. They're trying to say, I think this is a subject of others more than itself. Because I don't think if this virus was affecting just you, whether you make a decision to be vaccinated, it was affecting just you and your family or your kids, and it's got nothing to do with anybody else. I don't think you would see a mandate anyway.
Because so true.
That's correct. Yes. So the drive for the mandate is for the masses of people because we live in a parliamentary democracy. That's the way the government works. So the bigger question then is, what is your there is a story that I think Pastor you touched on. This child went to school and they had symptoms. As a result,
Mother was fine.
17 other kids got the disease.
Right.
Because of that child.
Right.
So they then had to find some other $800 or something like that.
Right. That's right.
But yes. So that's some of the things that now we have to think about. So my question is, that was just my thought process. But my question is, if I choose not to be vaccinated, I don't want to reveal whether I'm vaccinated or not at the moment, but
that's fine.
Yes, I will reveal that after. But what I'm saying is, if you choose not to be vaccinated, are you okay with me as a business owner saying you can't come to work because I'm the business owner? That's my right to balance that workplace.
Right. Yeah.
Probably
that's what I was saying to Robert.
Probably based on what my customers are asking me.
Exactly. And that's
it just goes from one place to another. So my question was, let's say I want to ask on the unvaccinated side, are you okay, like in a church setting, for two services to be held, vaccinated and unvaccinated? Are you okay in a restaurant to have vaccinated and unvaccinated and not bother you?
Right.
To only those that can accommodate that. But when you go to Sports World, like Pastor, you're talking about
the arena.
They talked about Toronto FC, they talked about the Raptors, they talked about Maple Leafs,
right?
That they've just put a rule.
Right.
So my question is really for the unvaccinated, or those that think we should not be mandated to be vaccinated. Are you okay with those settings? Where we have a 9 o'clock service for the unvaccinated and the 11 o'clock service for the vaccinated.
Derek says it's the Jim Crow laws.
Maybe as we're getting ready to open up our doors, you just gave me a new idea. The 8:30 will be for the vaccinated, and the 11 o'clock will be for the You know, I personally, my personal opinion is that this has no bearing on us gathering, because if we say it does, we're denying the power of God. And I'm not being irresponsible, but I believe that there's a complete difference when we talk about gathering together to worship in the presence of God. I'm a Psalm 91. No plague comes nigh us. Nothing shall befall us. So that's my position. Daniel, thank you so much. I've got 10 seconds to wrap this up. Big Cola, would you just say goodbye to everyone? And I'll use the last second to say goodbye.
Yes, this has been a really engaging conversation. We want to thank everyone who showed up on Teams, and those who, there's a lot of comments on YouTube as well that I'll have to go back to and read. But thank you so much. We ask that you join us again this time next week.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Maybe we'll pick it up, and maybe we'll do something else. Have a wonderful evening. Know that I love you. See you next time on Conversations.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now.
Bye-bye.